Finally, but definitely not least, Freya McClements. Freya is a BBC journalist and producer and a literary reviewer for the Irish Times. Her debut collection of short stories, The Dangerous Age of Things, was published by Guildhall Press in 2012 with the support of the Arts Council of Northern Ireland. Freya also, I have to say this because it's the most fascinating thing I know about anybody, was captain of a winning university challenge team.
Whoa! Whoa!
You just don't get better than that. So we're terribly proud to have you here, Freya, and come up and give us a story, please.
We're obviously here in the heart of Craigan, so I thought it was appropriate to read a story that was set in Derry, and this one in particular sort of name checks a number of places in the city, so that's why I went for this one. This is the end of this particular story. It's called Homecoming. Home. The streets have that fresh early morning feel, as if life has paused to wonder at what the day might bring. I rush down the road and across the square, smiling in recognition of a passing postman. Hurrying on, I turn the corner and I see our door. There's no answer. I feel in my pocket for my key, but I'm distracted by the state of the sitting room. The curtains have been left open and the room looks dishevelled, empty beer glasses littering the floor, blankets and pillows piled up on the sofa. For a moment I wonder if you're asleep under the detritus, and I knock on the window. Nothing stirs. I peer through the glass, searching for signs of life, but all I see is my plant on the mantelpiece, dead. You've forgotten to water it. Rubbish lies piled up in the hearth, a tiny altar to your sloth. Our house feels abandoned and neglected, as if nobody's lived there in months. I turn and I walk quickly down the path. The park where I decide to wait for you is built on a hill overlooking the city, and from a graffitied bench I pick out familiar landmarks: my old school, the cathedral, the city walls. I follow the river as it winds its leisurely way northwards, carrying a cruise ship out to sea and onto somewhere new, somewhere more exciting. Below in the bogside, a team of men perched on ladders are repainting Free Derry Corner, while a tour group takes pictures from which the misery and suffering have been edited out by time. I see you at last, walking up the hill on the other side of the road, a holdall slung over your back like a crumpled shell. I wave, but you don't see me, so I follow you like an amateur spy as you walk, without urgency, towards our house. I see you search for your keys in your familiar fumbling way, then you go inside and I lose sight of you. I picture you going into the kitchen and turning on the kettle. A few minutes later, your shadow comes into the sitting room and the television flickers to life. If I walk up the path now, you'll see me. I imagine you opening the door and kissing me on the step, then ushering me inside and shutting out the world. Tempted, my hand rests on the gate. You're probably already stretched out on the sofa, the remote in your hand. I creep up and peer in at you, watch your peculiar mannerisms, the way you brush your hair back from your eyes, the way you fiddle idly with the watch I bought you. Eventually you fall asleep, arms wrapped around yourself like a child seeking comfort. I take the key out of my pocket and drop it gently through the letterbox onto the unseen mat. With one last look through the window, I turn and walk back the way I came. Thank you.
I was quite surprised reading The Dangerous Age of Things, in that it's some parts of it are very, very dark, and yet you're one of the happiest people I knew. My father once told me that he met John McGahern, who I was amazed to hear was an extremely happy and cheery person as well. Having read John McGahern once and never wanting to read him again because it just made me so sad. Where does it come from, and which is the real Freya McClements?
You know, I don't know, and sometimes it sort of scares me a bit, actually, because all of the stories and everything I write comes from some small kernel of truth. So that the second story that I wrote, Homecoming, actually came from the process of walking out of the college I was studying in Oxford, and it was all sort of very medieval, in the middle of the night, to catch the bus to Heathrow to go home for the holidays. So it was sort of that journey, and the story itself is nothing like that, but it sort of comes from a little small kernel, and they all do. But there's something that happens when you start to write it. They sort of take on a life of their own, and they go off on these sort of tangents. So all of them in quite unexpectedly. And someone said to me after it was published, you know, you're very dark, aren't you? And I'd never thought of myself in that way, but I think there's just something about the creative process or what happens when I write. I think I always like things that are unexpected, so maybe that's it. I don't think.
I finally just wanted to ask you, and I haven't asked anybody else, is your work has got many influences, and I've detected people from the likes of Sean O'Connor, maybe some of the Russians in there as well. And it also, I have to say, carries great weight. What next for you? Where are you taking your work? Are you going to stick with the novel form? Are you going to go back to short stories? Where would you see yourself maybe in 5 years' time? You're the youngest performer here, and I think that you're certainly going places. Where would you like that to be?
I think the novel's something that I have to do, and I really do have to do it because the Arts Council gave me money to help me write it, so I really have to do it. But it's also something that I've wanted to do for a long time, and I think it's something I need to get out of my system. But I think I'll always write short stories, and even sort of in the last few days, when I talk about sort of little things that happen, there's been a couple of things that have come to me. I think there's a short story in that, and it may take a couple of years, but eventually it'll work itself out in my head, and I'll know where it's going, and I'll write.
But film or drama or any of the other disciplines, or have you looked towards those at all?
I've thought about drama. I sort of I've an idea about a play. I sort of have a play half written. I'm very good, and you know about this, I'm very good at half writing things and then going back and revising the bit that I've written and actually not getting it finished. But ultimately, I think, certainly like Julian, I think like a lot of us here, I would like my life to be more in writing and in creativity and facilitating, necessarily more than journalism. So hopefully that's the direction we'll go.
Best of luck with that, Freya. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
coming.